So we are currently in week 11, and the topic for week 11 is improving communication, which is chapter 8 of your book, Communicating. The learning objectives for this week are to develop emotional intelligence, to communicate in teams, to getting things done in a group, to criticism is constructive, and communicating with instructors. The assignments for this week are to read chapter 8, to watch this pre recorded live lecture meeting, to do the quiz, and to complete the written assignment. So as of right now, you do not see the quiz here, but it will be here, and so will be the pre-recorded lecture will also be here once I'm done with it. And this is the written assignment, which I am not going to go over now. I rather go over it during class, and that way I can answer all your questions, because this is the last project for the semester, and there's going to be a presentation, so I rather discuss that with you guys while we are in class. So I'm going to start off with the textbook for today's lesson. So as I stated, it's chapter 8 and it's titled Communicating. So as always, the chapter starts off with the power process, and for this chapter it is employ your word. And it states, when you give your word, you are creating literally. The person you are is, for the most part, a result of the agreements you make. Others know who you are by your words and your commitments, and you can learn who you are by observing which commitments you choose to keep and which ones you choose to avoid. Relationships are built on agreements. When we break a promise to be faithful to a spouse, to help a friend move to a new apartment, or to pay a bill on time, relationships are strained. The words we use to make agreements can be placed into 6 different levels. We can think of each level as one rung in a ladder, the ladder of powerful speaking. And as we move up the ladder, our speaking becomes more effective. The first and lowest rung on the ladder is obligation. Words used at this level include I should, he ought to, someone had better, they need to, I must, and I had to. Speaking this way implies that something other than ourselves is in control of our lives. When we live at the level of obligation, we speak as if we are victims. The second rung is possibility. At this level, we examine new options. We play with new ideas, possible solutions, and alternative courses of action. As we do, we learn that we can make choices that dramatically affect the quality of our lives. We are not the victims of circumstance. Phrases that signal this level include I might, I could, I'll consider, I hope to, and maybe. From possibility, we can move up to the third level, which is preference. Here we begin the process of choice. The words I prefer signal that we're moving toward one set of possibilities over another, perhaps setting the stage for eventual action. Above preference is the fourth rung called passion. Again, certain words signal this level are I want to, I'm really excited, I can't wait to. Actions come from the fifth rung, planning. When people use phrases such as I intend to, my goal is to, I plan to, and I'll try like mad to, they are at the level of planning. The intention statements you write in this book are examples of planning. The sixth and highest rung of the ladder is promising. This is where the power of your words really comes into play. At this level, it's common to use phrases such as I will, I promise, I am committed, and you can count on it. Promising is where we bridge from possibility and planning to action. Promising brings with it all of the rewards of employing your word. So communication and keeping the channels up. In our daily contact with other people in the mass media, we are exposed to hundreds of messages. Yet the obstacles to receive those messages accurately are numerous. For one thing, only a small percentage of communication is verbal. We also send messages with our bodies and with the tone of our voices. Throw in a few other factors such as a hot room or a background noise, and it's a wonder we can communicate at all. Written communication adds a whole other set of variables. When you speak, you supplement the meaning of your words with the power of body language and voice inflection. When you write, those nonverbal elements are absent. Instead, you depend on your skills at word choice, sentence construction, and punctuation to get your message across. The choices that you make in these areas can help or hinder communication. In communication theory, the term noise refers to any factor that distorts meaning. When noise is present, the channels of communication start to close. Noise can be external, such as a lawnmower outside of a classroom, or internal, the emotions of the sender or receiver, such as speech anxiety. To a large extent, skillful communications means reducing noise and keeping channels open. One powerful technique of doing these crucial things is to separate the roles of sending and receiving. Communication channels get blocked when we try to send and receive messages at the same time. Instead, be aware of when you are the receiver and when you are the sender. If you are receiving, listening, or reading, just receive. Avoid switching into sending, which is speaking or writing mode. When you are sending, stick with it until you are finished. Communication works best when each of us has plenty of time to receive what others send and the opportunity to send a complete message when it's our turn. Communication is a two-way street. When someone else talks, just listen. Then switch roles so that you can be the sender for a while. Keep this up until you do a reasonably complete job of creating a shared meaning. So, choosing to listen. So, to be an effective listener, you must choose to listen. So, through skilled listening, you can gain insight into other people and yourself. To listen well, begin with a clear intention. And finally, notice that these suggestions start with nonverbal listening, which involves remaining silent while another person talks. So, through skilled listening, you can gain insight into other people and yourself. You can also promote your success in school through more powerful notes, more productive study groups, and better relationships with students and instructors. To listen well, begin from a clear intention. Choose to listen well. Once you've made that choice, you can use the following techniques to be more effective at listening. Notice that these suggestions start with nonverbal listening, which involves remaining silent while another person talks. The second set of suggestions is about verbal listening, where you occasionally speak up to fully receive the speaker's message. So, nonverbal listening, it entails you to be quiet, to make eye contact, to display openness, to send nonverbal acknowledges, to release distractions, and to suspend judgments. Verbal listening requires you to send verbal acknowledgments. It requires you to choose when to speak at the right time, to give feedback meaning, to notice verbal and nonverbal messages, to listen for requests and intentions, to allow emotion, ask for more, be careful with questions and advice, and take care of yourself. I'm just going over the highlighted portion. It is your responsibility to read further into detail with these. Then it says to stay open to the adventure of listening. Be willing to make the effort. Be willing to put yourself on hold. Be willing to feel discomfort. Be willing to change. Experience the rewards. So choosing to speak. We all have this problem. Sometimes we feel wonderful or rotten or sad or scared and we want to express it. Emotions, though, can get in the way of the message. And although you can send almost any message through tears, laughter, fist pounding, or hugging, sometimes words are better. Begin with a sincere intention to reach common ground with your listener. Then experiment with the suggestions that follow. So replace you messages with I messages. It can be difficult to disagree with someone without his becoming angry or your becoming upset. When conflict occurs, we often make statements about the other person or you messages. We'll say stuff like, you are rude, you make me mad, you must be crazy, you don't love me anymore. This kind of communication results in defensiveness. The response might be similar to these: I am not rude, I don't care, no, you are crazy, no, you don't love me. You messages are hard to listen to. They label, judge, blame, and assume things that may or may not be true. They demand rebuttal. Even praise can sometimes be ineffective with you messages. You messages don't work. Psychologist Thomas Gordon suggests that when communication is emotionally charged, consider limiting your statements to descriptions about yourself. Replace you messages with I messages. Instead of you are rude, you might say I feel upset. Instead of you make me mad, you could say something like I feel angry. Instead of you must be crazy, you can say I don't understand. And instead of saying you don't love me anymore, you can say I'm afraid we're drifting apart. Suppose a friend asks you to pick him up at the airport. You drive 20 miles and wait for the plane. No friend. You decide your friend missed her plane, so you wait 3 hours for the next flight. No friend. Perplexed and worried, you drive home. The next day, you see your friend. You see your friend in downtown, and you ask, "What happened?" You ask. "Oh, I caught an earlier flight." "You're a rude person," you reply. Look for and talk about the facts, the observable behavior. Everyone will agree that your friend asked you to pick her up, and that she did take an earlier flight, and that you did not receive a call from her. But the idea that she is rude is not a fact, it is a judgment. She might go on to say, "I called your home and no one answered. My mom had a stroke and was rushed to Valley View. I caught the earliest flight I could. Your judgment no longer fits." When you saw your friend, you might have said, "I waited and waited at the airport. I was worried about you. I didn't get a call. I feel angry and hurt. I don't want to waste my time. Next time you can call me when your flight arrives, and I'll be happy to pick you up." iMessages don't judge, blame, criticize, or insult. They don't invite the other person to counteract with more of the same. iMessages are also more accurate. They report our own thoughts and feelings. At first, iMessages might feel uncomfortable or seem forced. That's okay. Your skill with using this technique will improve with patience. It also states to remember that questions are not always questions, to choose your nonverbal messages, to notice barriers to sending messages, to speak candidly, to offer feed forward, to speak up, and take these ideas to work as well. So, developing emotional intelligence. In his book, Working with Emotional Intelligence, Daniel Goleman defines emotional intelligence as a cluster of traits, and they are as follows: self awareness, self regulation, motivation, empathy, and skills in relationship. Goleman concludes that IQ washes out when it comes to predicting who among a talented pool of candidates within an intellectually demanding profession will become the strongest leader. At that point, emotional intelligence starts to become more important. If you are emotional intelligent, you're probably described as someone with good people skills. You're aware of your feelings, you act in thoughtful ways, show concern for others, resolve conflict, and make responsible decisions. Your emotional intelligence skills will serve you in school and in the workplace, especially when you collaborate on projects with teams. You can deepen your skills with the following strategies. So the first one is recognize three elements of your emotion. Even the strongest emotion consists of just three elements: physical sensation, thoughts, and action. Usually they happen so fast that you can barely distinguish them. Separating them out is a first step toward emotional intelligence. Imagine that you suddenly perceive a threat, such as a supervisor who's screaming at you. Immediately your heart starts beating more quickly and your stomach muscles clench. That's your physical sensation. Then thoughts race in your head. This is a disaster, she hates me, and everybody's watching. Finally, you take action, which could mean staring at her, yelling back, or running away. So name your emotions. Naming your emotions is a first step to going beyond the fight or flight reaction to any emotion. Naming gives you power. The second that you attach a word to an emotion, you start to gain perspective. People with emotional intelligence have a rich vocabulary to describe a wide range of emotions. For example, do an internet search with the keywords feeling list. Read through the list you find for examples of ways that you can name your feelings in the future. So accept your emotions. Another step toward emotional intelligence is accepting your emotions, all of them. This can be challenging if you've been taught that some emotions are good whereas others are bad. Experiment with another viewpoint. You do not choose your emotional reactions. However, you can choose what you do in response to any emotion. Express your emotions. One possible response to any emotion is expressing it. The key is to speak without blaming others and use I messages to state what you observe, what you feel, and what you intend to do. Respond rather than react. So run a mood meter, write discovery statements, write intention statements. So the heart of the emotional intelligence is moving from mindless reaction to mindful action. See whether you can introduce an intentional gap between sensations and thoughts on the one hand and your next action on another hand. To do this more often, read a mood meter. Check in with your mood several times a day. You can use a 3x5 card. Note the time of day of your emotional state at that point. Rate your mood on a scale of 1 for relaxed and positive to 10 very angry, very sad, and very afraid. Write discovery statements. In your journal, write about situations in daily life that trigger strong emotions. Describe these events and your personal usual response to them in detail. Write intention statements. After seeing patterns in your emotions, you can consciously choose to behave in new ways. Instead of yelling back at an angry supervisor, for example, make it your intention to simply remain silent and breathe deeply until he finishes. Then say, I'll wait to respond until we've both had a chance to cool down. So make decisions with emotional intelligence. When considering a possible choice, ask yourself, how am I likely to feel if I do this? You can use gut feeling to tell when an action might violate your values or hurt someone. Think of emotions as energy. Anger, sadness, and fear send currents of sensations through your body. Ask yourself how you can channel that energy into constructive action. So, on to communicating in teams, getting things done as a group. So your experience in higher education will include group projects. These projects can be fun and rewarding. They can also fall flat and lead to frustration. To avoid the pitfalls that take teams down, develop some specific skills in communication. So start with an attitude check, then master your first meeting, which would require you to introduce yourself and share key information and talk about your team experience, define your outcome, choose the roles, plan tasks and timelines, choose when and how to meet, deal with challenges. The way to go about that is get the most from meeting time, rein in an overbearing member, resolve conflict, allow emotions, listen fully, speak with I messages, focus on solutions. Put the finishing touches on your project. Many groups come to a halt the moment they turn in their final project. This deprives the members of the chance to review their group experience, draw lessons from it, and develop continuing relationships. Instead, make it a habit to do the following. Send all group members an email thanking them for their work. Invite group members to get together socially after the course if this seems appropriate. Keep your own copies of the materials that the group created and turned into your instructor. Write discovery statements that describe what worked well in your group and what you'd like to improve. Write intention statements about what you'll do differently to make your next group project even more effective. So managing conflict. The first 5 stages discussed are about dealing with the context of conflict, define the problem, exploring viewpoints, and discovering solutions. The remaining strategies are about finding a process for resolving any conflict, no matter what the content. To bring these strategies to life, think of ways you would use them to manage the conflict you are facing right now. So focus on contact. Back up to common ground. Conflict heightens the differences between people. When this happens, it's easy to forget how much we still agree with each other. As a first step in managing conflict, back up to common ground. List all of the points on which you are not in conflict. I know that we disagree about how much to spend on a new car, but we do agree that the old one needs to be replaced. Often such comments put the problem into perspective and pave the way for a solution. State the problem. Using I messages, as explained earlier in this chapter, state the problem. Tell people what you observe, feel, think, want, and intend to do. Allow the other people in a particular conflict to do the same. Each person might have a different perspective of the problem, and that is fine. Let the conflict come into clear focus. It is hard to fix something unless people agree on what is broken. Remember that the way you state the problem largely determines the solution. Defining the problem in a new way can open up a world of possibilities. So, for example, I need a new roommate is a problem statement that indicates one solution. We could use some agreements about who cleans the apartment. Opens up more options, such as resolving a conflict about who will wash the dishes tonight. So state all the points of views, ask for complete communication, focus on solutions, and focus on the future. So focus on the process, commit to the relationship, allow strong feelings, notice your need to be right, slow down the communication, communicate in writing, get an objective viewpoint, allow for cultural differences, agree to disagree, see the conflict within you, and take these ideas to work. So, 5 ways to say no respectfully. So, think critically about your assumption, plan your refusal, avoid apologies or qualifiers, wait for the request, and remember that no one leads to another yes. No one no leads to another yes. So, 5 steps to effective complaints. Number 1, go to the source. Number 2, present the facts without blaming anyone. Number 3, learn about other options. Number 4, ask for commitments. And number 5, persist. Communicating with your instructors. So, research the instructor, show interest during class, engage with boring instructors, release judgments, separate liking from learning, form your own opinion about each instructor, and seek alternatives. So, diversity. I think I want to go to the PowerPoint for this. Let me open that up. No, let's go. Stay in the text. So, a typical American citizen awakens in a bed, an invention from the Near East. After dressing in clothes, possibly designed in Italy, she slices a banana, grown in Honduras, on her bowl, made in China, of cereal, and then brews coffee, shipped from Nicaragua. After breakfast, she reads the morning newspaper, printed by a process invented in Germany on paper, which was first made in China. Then she turns on her portable media player, made in Taiwan, and listens to music, possibly by a band from Cuba. The United States has a rich tradition of cultural diversity. The things we eat, the tools we use, and the words we speak are cultural tapestry woven by different peoples. So consider the many meanings of culture. The word culture embraces many kinds of differences. We can speak of the culture of large corporations and the culture of fine arts. There are the cultures of men and women, heterosexual, homosexual, and bisexual people, and older and younger people. There are also the cultures of urban and rural dwellers, the cultures of able-bodied people and people with disabilities, and the cultures of two-parent families and single-parent families. There are cultures defined by differences in standards of living and differences in religion. Recognize the many shades of discrimination. Hate crimes, hate speech, and harassments are obvious examples of intolerance. These are never acceptable, yet racism, homophobia, religious stereotyping, and other forms of discrimination can exist in ways that are subtle and still harmful. For example, members of a sociology class are debating the merits of reforming the state's welfare system. The instructor calls on a student who grew up on the reservation and says, "Tell us, what's the Native American perspective on the issue?" Here the student is being typecast as a spokesperson for her entire ethnic group. Students in a mass media communication class are discussing a situation comedy set in an urban high-rise apartment building with mostly African American residents. "Man, they really whitewashed that show," says one student. "It's mostly about inner city black people, but they didn't show anybody on welfare doing drugs or joining gangs." This student's comment perpetuates racial stereotypes. On the first day of the term, students taking English composition enter a class taught by a professor from Puerto Rico. One of the students asked the professor, "Am I in the right class? Maybe there's been a mistake. I thought this was supposed to be an English class, not Spanish class. The student assumed that only white people are qualified to teach English courses. Another example is two students are talking about a classmate named Ari Singh. Ari's a nice guy, says one of the students, but why does he get a haircut? Why doesn't he get a haircut and lose the turban? Someone's going to think that he's a radical Muslim. Yet Ari is actually a Sikh, whose religion requires both men and women to cover their hair. These students assume that Ari was Muslim. Even if Ari were Muslim, the assumption that he's a radical is another stereotype. So recognize the value of diversity as well. That's kind of self-explanatory. And seize the opportunity. Going to school brings you into one of the most diverse environments that you will ever encounter. Your fellow students could come from many ethnic groups and countries. In addition, consider faculty members, staff members, alumni, donors, and their families. Think of all the possible differences in their family backgrounds, education, job experience, religion, marital status, sexual orientation, and political viewpoints. Higher education offers an opportunity to move past discrimination in all its forms. Schools can become cultural laboratories, places where people of many cultures meet with the shared purpose of education. Learning to thrive with diversity will help you succeed in classrooms and workplaces that become more diverse each year. So, communicating across cultures. See the world through a different set of eyes. Reflect on experiences of privilege and prejudice. Look for differences between individualist and collective cultures. Look for a common ground. Speak and listen with cultural sensitivity. Look for individuals, not group representations. Find a translator, mediator, or model. Develop a support system and be willing to accept feedback. So, communicating as a first-generation student. One lesson of American history is that people who are the first in their family to enter higher education can succeed. Think about the former slaves who enrolled in the country's first African American colleges. Remember the ex-soldiers who used the GI Bill to earn advanced degrees. From their experiences, you can take some life-changing lessons about communicating with family members, friends, instructors, and fellow students. So, first, ask for academic support. You don't have to go at it alone. Your tuition buys access to many services: academic advising, dormitory advising, career services, financial aid, multicultural programs, tutoring, counseling, and more. Explore these sources of support. Also, ask about specific programs for first-generation students. Schedule a meeting with your academic advisor for after every term. Share your success and ask for help in solving problems. The key is to ask for help right away. Do this as soon as you feel stuck in a class or confused about how to complete the next step in your education. The next step is ask for emotional support. Keep a list of every person who stands behind you: relatives, friends, instructors, advisors, and employers. Check in with these people regularly via phone, email, and personal visits. Remind yourself that you are surrounded by people who want you to succeed. Resolve conflict with family members. When you walked into your first class in higher education, you brought along the expectations of your family members. Those people might assume that you'll return home and be the same person you were last year. The reality is that you will change while you are in school. Your attitudes, your friends, and your career goals may all shift. You might think that some of the people back home have limited ideas, and in turn, they might criticize you. This kind of conflict is normal in families with first-generation students. Maintain your relationships with loved ones and give them time to understand your world. Talk about what you're learning and how it will help you succeed, and also apply the suggestions in the book for resolving conflict. Build relationships with instructors. Long-term relationships with your favorite instructors offer many benefits. Over the years, instructors can turn into mentors, colleagues, and even friends. In particular, seek out instructors who were first-generation students. Ask them to put you in contact with other first-generation students and alumni. They can become part of your personal and professional networks. When you have instructors that you like, stay in contact with them after their courses end. Visit these instructors during office hours at least once per unit or per term until you graduate. Talk about your current experience and thank them for their contribution to your life. If you do well in their classes, ask instructors if they've been willing to write a recommendation for you in the future. Respond to prejudice. Bias and discrimination can exist on any campus. Just ask students of color, gay and lesbian students, immigrants, students working and students from working class and poor families. You might discover some common ground with all of them. Remember that the law is on your side. Every school has anti-discrimination policies based on state and federal rules. Search your school's website to find out exactly what these policies are and whom to contact if you experience discrimination. In addition, speak up if someone makes a negative comment or joke at your expense. Sometimes people have no idea how they affect you. Respond with I messages. For example, I realize that you don't mean to offend anybody, but I feel hurt and angry about what you just said. Or, what you are saying is not accurate. It's based on a stereotype, not the facts about me. And share your experiences. Return to your high school and talk to students about your experiences as a first generation student. Invite students who are considering college to visit you on campus. Also, thank the teachers and mentors who encouraged you to enter higher education. Remember that you can contribute to other students simply by sharing how you got to higher education. Did you grow up in a family that struggled to make ends meet financially? Then you know about how to live on a tight budget. Did you work to support your family while you were in high school? Then you know about managing your time and balancing major commitments. Did you grow up in a neighborhood with people of many races, religions, and levels of income? Then you know about how to thrive with diversity. Talking about your strengths can lead to a conversation that changes lives, including your own. So staying safe in social networks, for that I will go to the PowerPoint. So the textbook states to post only what you want made public and permanent, to use privacy features, to monitor your online presence, to respect the privacy of others, to friend people who care, to be cautious about meeting community members in person, to report malicious content, and remember netiquette. So 3 phases of effective writing. The 3 phases are getting ready to write, writing a first draft, and number 3 is revising your draft. So for phase 1, getting ready to write, it states to schedule and list tasks, to choose a topic, to write a thesis statement, to consider your purpose, to do initial research, outline, and do in-depth research. As if you guys remember when you did your research paper project, that was the first part of that project. So writing your first draft, gather notes and outline, ease into it. First drafts are not for keeps. Speak it, use free writing, make writing a habit, respect your deep mind, and get physical. And finally, revising your draft. Plan 2 to 3 revisions. Cut, paste, fix, prepare, and proof. Meaning proofread, go over your paper, read it a few times. Your paper is always going to change from your first draft to your final draft. Textbook also says to befriend your word processor. Go to office.microsoft.com to learn word commands and shortcuts. All of you as students at ASA College have an Outlook account through your email, which is offered through Microsoft. This also gives you access to Word, to PowerPoint, to Excel, to Teams, to a bunch of other apps and stuff that you guys have for free just for being an ASA student. So I would suggest that you use all that stuff while you are a student at school. So low-cost word processing software with commands and features similar to Words are Google Docs and Zoho Docs. And then use plain text editors. Some are less expensive, handle many common writing tasks, and they're compatible with most other software such as Note. So some examples are Notepad and Text Edit. And finally is mastering public speaking, and there are 3 phases. There's phase 1, which is preparing, phase 2, which is delivering, and phase 3, which is reflecting. You guys are going to have to do a presentation. That's what the assignment, the diversity assignment is going to be about. You guys completing a PowerPoint presentation. So for phase 1, to prepare for something like that, you need to start from passion, consider a process speech, analyze the audience, organize the presentation, write an introduction, write a main body, write a conclusion, Create speaking notes, create supporting visuals, overcome fear, and practice your presentation. Phase 2 is delivering. Dress for the occasion, project your voice, maintain eye contact, notice your nonverbal communication, notice time, pause when appropriate, and have fun. And finally, phase 3 is reflecting. Write journal entries and seek feedback. So let me go really quick back to the textbook and make sure that I covered everything. And yes, I did. So after you've now completed watching this video, please complete the lecture quiz. Thank you.